Sandeep, can you help explain this for us? There are, of course, multiple cities that we've been talking about, but there were specific bases, whether terror hideouts of Bahawalpur or Muridke, then the bases when it comes to Islamabad, Lahore, Rawalpindi specifically, that were chosen at the targets. I can only imagine the decision-making, Sandeep, and if you can reflect on that, to decide at that juncture within minutes to be able to strike precisely where Pakistan is trying to strike us.
Well, Pooja, it's very clear. All the location of all of Pakistan's air bases, every infrastructure of theirs is well known to our Air Force planners. They're on our radar always and every given time. There are operational orders of what to do in case of a conflict, and I'm sure that is where the Air Force was reaching out to last night or possibly the nights previous. Their targeting books that they would have pulled out and started looking at all these air bases. And they've been monitoring the movements of Pakistan Air Force assets from around these bases. And like I said earlier, all of these bases were chosen for a particular reason. These 6 air bases were struck because they were sending up aircraft into the air to launch weapons and target Indian bases, to launch drones at Indian civilians, launch fighter aircraft sorties towards Indian aircraft, towards Indian airfields, and to target Indian military infrastructure. So all of these attacks originated from these 6 sites that were chosen. So that is the reason that they are, making the government of India has made that cause and effect, that these sites were chosen precisely because this is from where you launched your sorties, you launched your fighter aircraft, you launched your attacks on Indian civilians, and also possibly where the Pak missiles, these high-speed missiles that the spokesperson mentioned, that's a very dangerous escalation, if you ask me, Pooja, because that is something that's almost unprecedented. Pakistan
Tell us more about that, Sandeep. Specifically, the kind of escalation Pakistan is indulging in.
Using using the Air Force, Pooja, is one thing. Launching standoff weapons is another thing. But launching ballistic missiles, high-speed precision missiles is a totally different ball game. You have escalated the game in a matter of hours. A nuclear weapon state escalating dangerously, telling out the rest of the world that we are up towards the stage when we could possibly look at using nuclear weapons as well, as Geeta was mentioning. This has been the Pakistani playbook all along. They rattle the nuclear saber whenever their assets are under threat from India, where there is a lot of global pressure or there's a lot of focus, attention. And in the last couple of days, you've seen these unprecedented Indian Air Force strikes on their assets. And as India ratchets up the pressure on Pakistan, they have begun reaching for their nuclear saber, not only to signal to India, but to tell the rest of the world that, hey, listen, if you don't hold India back, we will be forced to escalate the situation and even possibly look at nuclear weapons.
And India very categorically mentioning in the press conference that India will stop if Pakistan stops with these provocations and escalations. But I have to say, Sandeep, isn't it? It does bring me a certain kind of pride and relief, happiness as well, when we look at what happened at the air bases in Pakistan and compare it to how almost all the mentions we are putting out with the border states and cities of India, it's foiled, shot down. Drones have been shot down, missiles have been intercepted, and that also reflects on the kind of synergy and strategy Indian Armed Forces ensuring to protect our own people. But meanwhile, tell me about these images. Why do you think that the government ensured we put out the images to show, for example, in Sirsa, that look, our air bases are running just fine?
Well, it's, I think the government of India decided to ramp up its communications game, as we were talking about, Pooja, just a while ago. And the fact that they chose to put out these time-stamped images to call out Pakistan's fakery. There's been a lot of fake news floating around on social media where Pakistani handles have been sharing images of what they called airfield destruction and air bases being knocked out, Indian airfields being targeted. All of this has been called out by that briefing. Quite to the contrary, the kind of damage that's been inflicted across the border seems to be substantial. If you look at those craters in the air bases around the areas in Rahim Yar Khan, which have been targeted by the Indian Air Force, large craters possibly suggest the use of precision-guided munitions, air-to-ground munitions. The spokespersons mentioned that in their briefing. This is again a very, very big message to the Pakistan Air Force, Pooja, that if they choose to conduct these kind of attacks across the board, across Indian territory, this is the kind of response that they will be met
and
with.
And it's 2025, Sandeep. For far too long, I think, India has tried to be kind, to de-escalate, to not want war, to not have this conflict with the neighbor, but also perhaps realizing now, till when can you be the one keep pushing back and face these
Absolutely. I think, Pooja, you've nailed it. The government of India has signaled very clearly that enough is enough. We've been fighting Pakistan-sponsored terrorism for decades now, more than 3 decades, starting from Kashmir, and even before that, Punjab, Kashmir, and through the hinterland of India. This so-called death by 1,000 cuts, that this fantasy that the Pakistani generals have come up with, has now reached a point of no return for them, that this much and no further. 2025 is going to be the time when the government of India has drawn that line in the sand and said that this much and no further.
Even then, Sandeep, isn't it the restraint being shown by our Indian military to ensure civilians in Pakistan are not hit? I request you to please stay on with me because we have big news coming in. Secretary of State Marco Rubio spoke with India's External Affairs Minister S. Shankar, and Secretary Rubio emphasizing both sides need to identify methods to de-escalate, re-establish direct communication, avoid miscalculation. Our Foreign Affairs editor Geeta Mohan joining me on that. Geeta, how do you see the response coming in from United States of America? I believe there was a conversation with Rubio a few days ago as well with the External Affairs Minister. Then comes this. Tell us more.
Well, conversations between India and the United States of America and Pakistan and the United States of America is a continued process when it comes to the tensions between India and Pakistan. But what is most important right now is not Marco Rubio, who's the Secretary of State and National Security Advisor, Pooja, speaking with External Affairs Minister Dr. Shankar and the Pakistani Premier Shehbaz Sharif. The biggest news right now is Marco Rubio speaking with the Pakistani Army Chief. That the conversation between Marco Rubio and Asim Munir took place. And Marco Rubio insisted that there has to be de-escalation, but not just that, offered America's good officers to be used for mediation. Before this, we've had them talk about de-escalation and said that, they need to do it, they need to de-escalate, it's time. President Trump coming out and saying, you've done your tit for tat, it's now time for the two of you to sit across the table and talk. But Marco Rubio speaking with Asim Munir and saying that it's not just time to de-escalate, if need be, we are here to help the two of you come to an arrangement and an understanding. That's massive. After Iran, the Chinese have also come out, Pooja, and offered mediation. So countries in this scenario, what we are looking at right now is not how rattled Pakistan is or how the tensions are mounting and rising in between India and Pakistan, and which could impact the region. It's how rattled the world is right now. Tensions and a rise in tensions between India and Pakistan should worry the world, should worry how the countries look at this entire scenario. I keep saying this, India's position has been very clear that the ball indeed is in Pakistan's court. India was retaliating or responding to the Pahalgam terror attack, which was a game changer. It was a turning point, a playbook change, so to say, in how Pakistan and terrorism or terrorists from Pakistan looked at Kashmir and targeted a certain community in Pahalgam, sending a very strong message across to India. So the playbook, change of the playbook made India retaliate and respond. Now, the entire focus should be on ensuring that Pakistan stops. So the world is rattled, they are concerned, this is blowing up. These are two nuclear countries, and now Pakistani Premier is overlooking his nuclear arsenal. So it is a worrying point when it comes to India and Pakistan.
It may look like a threat, but knowing how unstable, unpredictable Pakistan is and the kind of steps they could